The calendar reads December 18th, 2025. And, well, as winter really starts to take hold on the Eastern Front, we have some operational news it's not just significant.
All right, it's structurally altering the entire strategic landscape.
Exactly. The headline, and this is based on confirmed reports, it's unambiguous. Ukraine just wiped out Russians in Pokrovsk. We are talking about confirmed territorial gains, a real demonstrable shift in military adaptation.
And a strategic success that really cuts against that whole narrative of a slow, grinding war.
I'm Alex. Join me with Aria in the latest Deep Dive by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we're going to cover...
Today we are analyzing the source material detailing Europe's war at a crossroads. And our mission is, well, it's ambitious. We're going to take a precise measure of this moment where kinetic military action is converging with evolving asymmetric warfare.
And high-stakes diplomatic negotiations in Berlin.
Right. We're trying to uncover exactly how institutional support from the West and Kyiv's, rapidly expanding strike capability are attempting to outpace Moscow's own strategy of attrition and coercion.
And the war map, it's expanded so dramatically beyond just the trench line. To give you a sense of the sheer scope of this deep dive, we've distilled 4 major shifts from the sources, all hitting at the same time this week. First, the surprising scale of Ukrainian territorial gains around Pokrovsk.
We really need to analyze what regaining 16 square kilometers actually means.
Yeah, in such a dense, contested area. Second, and this is huge,
A naval history milestone. We have unprecedented footage of Ukraine striking a Russian Kilo-class submarine inside a major Russian Port Novorossiysk using unmanned underwater vehicles.
I mean, that is a complete game changer for Black Sea security. Third, we'll look at the internal crisis that this kind of success creates for Moscow. It exposes this bizarre, cynical Russian command tactic of registering soldiers killed in action as AWOL.
Absent without leave.
Right. Just to secretly obscure massive casualty figures and, well, undermine the morale of their entire front.
And finally, we'll break down the diplomatic aftershocks from Berlin. Specifically, the U.S. agreement to provide NATO-like security guarantees for Ukraine's long-term defense, which, it fundamentally institutionalizes Western commitment.
If this analysis is critical to your understanding of global security and the future of Europe, we encourage you to follow our work. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. Okay, let's start where the fighting is the heaviest. Pokrovsk, in the Donbas. Wire reports are confirming that the fighting there has been just incredibly attritional recently.
And this all came to a head when Russia attempted what's being described as its heaviest mechanized push inside the city yet.
They were trying to mass their forces, right? I read they deployed over 30 armored vehicles, cars, even motorcycles.
Yeah, they were trying to exploit the poor weather for cover. But here's the first critical insight. That mechanized push was decisively repelled by Ukrainian defenders.
So this is more than just holding the line.
Oh, much more. It signaled a genuine tactical shift. Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky confirmed on December 17th that Ukrainian forces had reclaimed 16 square kilometers in the northern part of Pokrovsk. They aren't just surviving months of Russian pressure, they're successfully counterattacking.
And when you look at the context, that 16 square kilometers is enormous. I mean, to help you visualize the scale, that's roughly the size of a major city's international airport complex.
All reclaimed in a brief, coordinated push.
Exactly. And you compare that to Russia's months-long grinding offensive.
It's night and day. Since late July, Russian forces have been operating inside Pokrovsk. That's over 118 days. And yet, our sources show that before this recent Ukrainian success, Russia had only consolidated 66% of the town.
And their advance was what, something like 0.12 kilometers a day?
An average of just 0.12 kilometers per day. So you have nearly 4 months to advance a little over 14 kilometers total.
And then a single Ukrainian counterattack reclaims 16 square kilometers in a few days. It really shows a tactical superiority that just counters months of slow, costly Russian progress. But why now? Is this a temporary victory, or does it signal something more systemic in how Russia is managing its reserves?
I think it points towards systemic Russian exhaustion combined with Ukrainian adaptation in rapid strike and defense coordination. And that exhaustion, well, it brings us directly to this chilling internal crisis revealed by partisans inside Russia.
Okay.
Specifically, agents from the Atesh movement, they're inside Russia's 30th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade. They uncovered a shocking administrative fraud.
This is where the story gets darker than you'd expect. Tell us about this casualty fraud.
The command is deliberately recording soldiers killed in action, or KIA, as having left their unit without permission.
AWOL. They're faking desertion records for dead men.
They are. And the purpose is transparently cynical. It's to hide the real number of battlefield casualties from Moscow. And maybe more importantly, to avoid the complaints and compensation payments that are due to the relatives.
Just think of the sheer scale here. Atesh sources are reporting that the number of these fictitious deserters is now so large it could staff an entire brigade.
It's a deliberate, high-level policy of deception.
And the perverse logic they're sharing among the personnel is just chilling. Commanders apparently believe AWOL is easier than explaining to relatives where the body is.
I mean, this isn't just an administrative lie, it's a catastrophic operational failure. This cynical policy, it just breeds fear and intense suspicion among the troops still fighting.
Of course. If a soldier knows he might be written off as a deserter if he dies,
Denying his family compensation and his own sacrifice.
it would completely destroy unit cohesion and motivation.
And it ultimately degrades their combat effectiveness, which paves the way for the very Ukrainian successes we just talked about in Pokrovsk. It's an unsustainable internal corrosion.
So that pushback on the ground, it begs the question of whether Kiev is now moving beyond just defense and into offensive capabilities that strike at Russia's strategic depth.
I think we're seeing a genuine inflection point in their asymmetric reach, especially at sea.
The Black Sea.
The Black Sea is now fundamentally redrawn. The most historic piece of footage released this week showed a successful strike by unmanned underwater vehicles, UUVs, hitting a Russian Kilo-class submarine.
While it was docked inside Novorossiysk.
Exactly, inside the port.
Let's just underscore the significance of that for a second. This is the first known UUV strike against a submarine in naval history. It's a huge technological and operational landmark.
It really is. The use of unmanned surface vessels had already degraded the Black Sea Fleet, but the UUVs add a completely new dimension of stealth and reach.
The impact has to be immense. When Russia pulled its major assets back from Crimea, Novorossiysk was supposed to be a sanctuary,
A secure port, far from the conflict. This strike proves there is virtually no safe haven left for the Black Sea Fleet. The Russian Navy now faces this persistent, multi-layered threat wherever its vessels are docked.
And this expanding reach isn't just limited to the Black Sea coast.
Not at all. Ukraine is widening the contest to industrial nodes deep inside the Russian rear. It demonstrates a very coherent strategy.
A strategy of complicating logistics and imposing costs at range.
We confirmed a highly successful strike on the Astrakhan gas processing plant. This facility is critical to Russia's war economy. It produces sulfur, gasoline, diesel, fuel oil.
All essential materials. So hitting targets like that puts pressure directly on the financial and logistical backbone supporting the front.
And that strategic pressure is unrelenting. We also confirmed what was the third strike in about a week on Lukoil infrastructure in the Caspian Sea.
And this forced a halt in output at the Korshagan oil and gas field.
This is the operational thesis right here. By extending the battlefield deep into Russia's industrial and energy sectors, Ukraine forces Moscow to divert resources and attention away from the front line. It challenges Russia's whole concept of territorial invulnerability.
And it ensures the economic cost of the war is felt far from the trenches.
Right. And while Ukraine expands its reach, Russia is responding with its own coercive campaign. They're escalating their long-term strategy of, well, coercion by darkness as we get into the peak winter period.
They're focusing on winning leverage through attrition and blackouts.
By targeting Ukraine's essential energy infrastructure with renewed intensity.
The analysis of this campaign is really sobering. Russian strikes now actively threaten to fracture Ukraine's centralized energy grid into two separate parts.
Along an east-west divide.
Yeah, and this isn't just a theoretical risk. If they're successful, it could lead to a complete catastrophic blackout across eastern Ukraine. We're talking about Kyiv, other critical cities. It's a national security and a humanitarian threat all in one.
And Russia is maximizing the damage by launching these massive combined missile and drone strikes every 7 to 10 days.
I saw that. They're timing the cycle.
Precisely. To hit infrastructure that is undergoing active repairs from the last barrage, this prevents any sustained recovery or stockpiling of spare parts.
The human reality of that strategy was just starkly visible. Over 430,000 subscribers in Odessa Oblast were plunged into darkness after that December 13th strike.
430,000 people. And you have to think about the logistical difficulty of maintaining a stable civilian population, hospital functions, military support,
all under that constant calculated pressure. What are we seeing in terms of new Russian weapon tactics to maximize these deficits?
Two things really stand out. First, they're reintroducing the use of relatively inexpensive glide bombs to pressure infrastructure.
So these are guided, unpowered bombs that let aircraft launch from a safer distance.
Right, but they still require manned aircraft to get close to Ukrainian air defense envelopes, which is still risky for them. Second, Ukrainian experts have observed the deployment of Shahed drones, now equipped with dual 100-kilogram warheads.
Doubling their destructive payload against static infrastructure like transformer stations,
Exactly.
which just makes the whole air defense conversation more urgent than ever. If Russia is doubling the payload of its cheap drones and timing strikes to prevent repairs, what does Kyiv need most right now?
The immediate requirement is Western-provided air defense systems, specifically the missiles needed to keep those systems operational, and just as important, sustained partner support for Ukraine's own drone interceptor development programs.
We did see some crucial support come through recently.
We did. The Norwegian military aid package, it's valued at 3.2 billion kroner, which is about $314 million.
And that package specifically focuses on F-16 ammunition and advanced air defense.
Yes, and that aid was facilitated by the Jumpstart Initiative, which is a key detail. It's essentially a new, rapid procurement and delivery framework designed to fast-track high-priority equipment.
Like air defense components.
And advanced munitions, getting them from NATO partners into Ukrainian hands as quickly as possible. This timely flow support is the direct counter to that Russian winter strategy of coercive attrition.
All right, so shifting our view from the battlefield to the diplomatic theater, high-stakes talks in Berlin signaled a massive long-term institutional commitment to Kyiv that kind of ironically runs parallel to the intensifying conflict.
It's a huge development.
Yeah.
U.S., Ukrainian, and European officials met in mid-December, and they agreed on unspecified NATO-like security guarantees for Ukraine's future.
That diplomatic language is incredibly potent. These assurances are explicitly described as Article 5-like.
Which directly references the collective defense clause of the NATO treaty. It's not full NATO membership, not yet, but these guarantees establish a robust, maturing Western security framework for Ukraine's long haul.
And they include specific categories, right, for oversight and deconfliction.
And long-term capability building. It sends a message to Moscow that Western support is becoming structural, not just transactional.
What's fascinating is the assessment of the overall peace plan they're discussing. U.S. officials assess that there's consensus on about 90% of the U.S.-authored plan.
That is shocking progress for a conflict of this scale.
It really is. And they also noted that Russia had previously indicated it's open to Ukraine joining the European Union, which removes one major political hurdle.
But the devil is always in that remaining, most fundamental 10%.
Right.
The sticking points are the core Russian demands, territorial issues, which would likely require a discussion between Zelensky and Putin themselves, something Putin has consistently declined.
And Ukraine's NATO bid. Russia is demanding Ukraine concede land, mainly in Donbass, and just renounce its path toward the alliance.
So you have this paradox. The West is institutionalizing security, but Putin is hardening his military demands. He made his position crystal clear on December 17th.
He warned that if the opposing side rejects substantive dialogue, Russia will seek to, and I'm quoting, extend its gains and achieve the liberation of its historical lands by military means.
That threat just creates this strategic backdrop where the diplomatic efforts are being actively undermined by military ambition.
And we should acknowledge that this institutionalization of support, it isn't perfectly seamless.
No, we noted some internal European friction that complicates that picture of unity. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico, for example, refused to back any scheme that leads to further war support.
And he specifically opposed using frozen Russian assets for military aid, right? He wanted them for reconstruction.
Exactly. He prefers they be earmarked solely for Ukraine's eventual reconstruction. So this divergence of views within the EU, it just adds a layer of complexity when you're trying to institutionalize unified long-term support.
So if the kinetic war is on the battlefield and the coercive war is on the energy grid, we need to turn to the strategic theater of covert action, what military analysts are now calling Russia's Phase Zero escalation against Europe itself.
The Institute for the Study of War assesses that Russia's increasing attacks, both overt and covert, against Europe are part of a broader informational and psychological effort.
Condition setting.
Condition setting for a possible future war with NATO. This isn't random. It's calculated probing and intimidation designed to test reactions and sow discord.
And the brazenness of these incidents is escalating so rapidly. We've seen repeated balloon incursions in NATO airspace. They recently forced Lithuanian airports to shut down multiple times.
The reports indicated roughly 60 balloons were detected in one sighting alone. It might seem low-tech, but the intent to disrupt is very clear.
But the highest risk incident, just in terms of strategic security, involved 5 drones flying over the Elong nuclear submarine base in France on December 4th.
And that base houses France's 4 SSBNs, its nuclear ballistic missile submarines.
An unauthorized, successful incursion over a nuclear deterrent facility is a massive escalation, a grave security breach.
It is. And this whole shift in military strategy, it creates enormous challenges for international accountability and for evidence gathering. It's fascinating how these war dynamics immediately impact professionals in things like information security and cross-border litigation.
How so?
Well, the intensifying focus on Ukraine's energy grid reinforces that kinetic strikes are often the terminal phase of a hybrid kill chain. This means allied nations have to be incredibly vigilant against precursor cyber probing of their own industrial control systems.
Especially in critical infrastructure.
Exactly. And at the same time, the SBU's release of that geolocated UUV footage illustrates what some are calling the democratization of intelligence. It's creating this rapidly growing volume of open-source digital evidence.
Evidence that has to be authenticated and preserved for future war crimes, tribunals, and litigation. It's a whole new challenge for international law.
And those diplomatic commitments from Berlin, the NATO-like assurances, they have immediate practical financial security implications. The solidification of these Western security frameworks, it signals a hardening global compliance landscape. So firms operating in Eastern Europe, or those involved in reconstruction, they're going to face rigorous new Know Your Customer or KYC and sanctions screening requirements.
So the war is being fought physically, digitally, legally, and financially all at once.
So what does this all mean for you, for the listener tracking the war? I think we're seeing this simultaneous hardening of Ukraine's defense capability. You see it in the 16 square kilometers reclaimed in Pokrovsk and the successful UUV strikes against the Russian naval sanctuary.
And that's being matched by the institutionalization of Western security support through those Berlin guarantees.
And all this is happening as Russia pursues its cynical twin strategies of coercion against the energy grid and just outright deception about its own casualties.
So here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over. Given that the U.S. has agreed to provide NATO-like guarantees and 90% of the peace plan is settled, how will the Kremlin pivot its war strategy when its primary diplomatic demands, no NATO territorial concessions, are being institutionally bypassed by the West? This diplomatic progress makes achieving both a military victory and a negotiated victory significantly harder for Moscow to achieve without some kind of massive, unpredictable escalation. You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex Anaria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry.
Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.